cellular respiration, specifically aerobic respiration, which means that it requires oxygen. The reactants for this reaction are glucose and 6 oxygen molecules. The products of this reaction are 6 CO2, 6 H2O and 36 ATP molecules. The first reactant we're going to use is glucose, and it is the input for the process called glycolysis. This process does not require oxygen and it occurs in the cytoplasm. When glucose enters this process, it is broken down into 2 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate or pyruvic acid. As glucose is broken down, it also releases hydrogen ions. These are picked up by acceptor molecules called NAD, and when they are loaded with hydrogen ions and electrons, they become NADH. 2 of them are released here. Don't confuse NADH with the NADPH that you find in photosynthesis. As glucose is broken down, it also releases 2 ATP molecules. Glycolysis is the first stage of cellular respiration. Hopefully you can see that the green represents the inputs and the blue represents the outputs. Now pyruvate is really important for the second stage of cellular respiration. However, it needs to undergo a conversion. So it goes from being a 3-carbon molecule to a 2-carbon molecule called acetyl-CoA. Obviously, to go from a 3-carbon molecule to a 2-carbon molecule, a carbon must be lost. This carbon joins with 2 oxygens and creates carbon dioxide. 2 carbon dioxide molecules are released here. More hydrogens are released, which are picked up by another 2 NAD to make 2 NADH molecules. Acetyl-CoA now moves into the mitochondria, specifically the matrix or the fluidy component of the mitochondria, into a process called the Krebs cycle, which is the second stage of cellular respiration. Oxygen is also required for this reaction to occur. Now, as acetyl-CoA moves in, there are a series of steps that occur which you don't really need to know in detail. What you do need to know is the input is acetyl-CoA, and what comes out are 2 ATP molecules, 4 CO2 molecules, another 6 loaded NAD molecules to make NADH, and here we're introduced to a new acceptor molecule called FAD. These also accept hydrogen and electrons, so when they are loaded, they become FADH2, and there are 2 released here. The most commonly used term for this cycle is the Krebs cycle, but you may also refer to it as the citric acid cycle, so just be aware of that. Now we have released all of the carbon dioxide that we need to for this equation, 2 in the conversion of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, and the remaining 4 in the Krebs cycle. So if we go up to our initial equation, we can tick this off. Now all of the loaded acceptor molecules, the NADH and the FADH2, move into the mitochondrial cristae, which is the membrane inside the mitochondria, to the third stage called the electron transport chain. So altogether we'll have 10 NADHs and 2 FADH2s going into the mitochondrial cristae. All of these loaded acceptor molecules release their hydrogen ions and their electrons into the mitochondrial cristae for the third stage of cellular respiration, the electron transport chain. This stage also requires oxygen. Because the mitochondrial cristae is a membrane, you'll see a phospholipid bilayer, and embedded in that bilayer are a series of proteins called cytochromes. The electrons move into the plasma membrane here, and they don't move across it, they actually move through it. The cytochromes actually shuttle the electrons through the membrane until they get to the end of the electron transport chain. The hydrogen ions are also released and they move across the membrane into the mitochondrial matrix. By doing this, it generates a force to push the electrons along and generates energy in the form of 32 ATP molecules. It converts ADP into ATP with the help of ATPase, which is an enzyme. Now the electrons that get to the end of the electron transport chain need to be picked up, and they are picked up by an electron acceptor, really commonly known as oxygen. The hydrogen ions that have been moved into the mitochondrial matrix now join up with the oxygen, so 2 will join up to create water. And if you look at the original equation, we create 6 water molecules here. And we've also generated our 36 ATP, 32 from the electron transport chain, another 2 from the Krebs cycle, and another 2 from glycolysis, therefore creating 36 in total. And the 6 O2 molecules are used to drive the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. So there are the three stages of cellular respiration: glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain.